welcome to an ISM podcast. I'm here today with Robert Kuhn, President of Kuhn Associates Management Advisors, LLC of New York. And today's topic is Sustainable Procurement Metrics. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Robert, I know there are a lot of tools out there that can advance sustainability. And as you know, though, many companies, there's an informal rule that you only do what you can measure. So what measurement tools are there available today in the area of sustainable procurement?
So there are actually quite a few. And I want to talk about those, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that the first thing we need to do is agree on the goals of sustainable procurement. We have to have that foundation in place before we set out measuring anything. So there are two aspects. Environmentally friendly goods and services. That's what you want to bring into your company. And the other portion is you want to bring that in from environmentally responsible suppliers. So given the fact that these two elements, which you should articulate in your goals to whatever degree of explicitness you want to or is consistent with your company's values, there are going to be two distinct sets of metrics that we develop here. One around those goods and services and one around the suppliers.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm wondering if there is some sort of foundation that you need to have in place before you design and implement these metrics. That would seem to be necessary, right?
So sure, you don't want to just charge off here and really do something that doesn't make sense. You want to make sure that you have a robust set of performance expectations in place. So you need to have some sort of guidance in your organization that talks about what you want to achieve. Do you want to be 80% there? Do you want to be 90% there? How granular do you want to be with the information you get? What do you do when you get it? Do you want to have action items? Do you want it to be a scorecard that sits here and is a visual representation of your performance expectations, and when they're not met, something lights up, for example, on a dashboard and says, we do something about that. I think you want to put those things in place first. That's part of the foundation. The other thing you want to do is really understand very well your own organization's capacity to do something with this. You're going to get a lot of data back, and large organizations are usually pretty comfortable handling data. But this is often data of a sort that people don't have right now in their shop. And so you want to understand you're going to be getting questionnaires back, and you're going to get numbers back of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. And you need to make sure your team has the capacity to handle that data and then do something about it. It's a little bit like a strategic plan. You put it out there and you don't think of your own capacity to do something with that, and it ends up going on the shelf at some point and people get demoralized. I think you want to be very careful here to set about a metrics measurement program that's something you can handle. So that would be the other part of the foundation.
Those are all good ideas. So what should we know about these two categories of sustainable procurement metrics?
So the two categories play out in actually two ways. So there are the two elements we want to talk about: environmentally friendly goods and services and environmentally responsible suppliers. And interestingly, we're going to measure those things internally with respect to the activities that we do as a procurement team. And we're going to have some metrics that focus externally on what our value chain, or in this case particularly supply chain partners, are doing. So we're going to create two categories of metrics, and we're going to have to watch very carefully that both those have some leading indicators in them and some lagging indicators. You want to know what you've done. You want to know what's coming down the pike. So there are going to be a set of internal measurements about your activity in procurement and a set of external measurements about your value chain partners. Some of those are going to look at goods and services, and some of those are going to look at the supplier attributes.
Interesting. I think most of the discussions I've heard about are measuring external things. Can you talk a bit more about the internal category of metrics?
Sure. I think a lot of people actually, some people think of this and are used to measuring their own business activity as a tool to guide their own deployment of resources and understand what in their day-to-day work is of value. And it should be no different here in sustainability. We should be looking at what we're doing as a team. So I suggest there be about 5 or 8 internally focused metrics, some of which go to environmentally friendly goods and services. That's the one thing you want to start looking at. So what's an example there? You might look at the number of life cycle assessments of current products that your company offers that have been completed. And those LCAs are generally going to involve the procurement function. You might look at the number of green product development workshops that the procurement team has participated in as R&D goes off and looks at the opportunity to build new product based on environmental attributes. You might measure the number of procurement categories with sustainable procurement guidelines as you develop those and push those into categories. And keep track of those, and that number should keep going up. And then you're going to measure things that you do internally to develop an environmentally responsible supply base. So what % of your total supply base is under an environmental review? 20%, 30%. Hopefully that number grows. What % of your supply base or your spend is in a scorecarding program for sustainability? So how much of that have you deployed? And you should deploy more of it over time. And you might also look at the number of new suppliers you've qualified under some sort of sustainable purchasing guidelines. Often we put those in place and we put it into contract language and we say on a going forward basis, new suppliers have to adhere to this. So what % of your supply base as you migrate that out have you captured? So those are the internally focused metrics about the activity you were doing. Those are a few examples.
These sound like fairly easy things to track. What could a company do with this information that would help move the sustainability ball forward?
So you're going to gather all this information about what you're doing and what your team has done. And I think the first thing you want to do with that is have an assessment, maybe every 6 months or a year, it depends on how much time you have, what your resources are, to help guide the programmatic work you're doing. Maybe we are done with life cycle assessments. We're up to 100%. We've done that on every existing product. We can move on to other activity in the procurement team. Or, we've hit our performance expectation of 80% of our supply base being in a sustainability review. So we can move to something else. So it can help guide that programmatic work. The other thing, I think eventually we're going to get an integration here of this activity into enterprise value, which isn't really a discussion for this podcast, but one of the aspects of that is incentivizing your team to do more of this work, do the right part of this work more frequently. And that can be tied to compensation, can be tied to reviews, can be tied to awards. So one of the things you can do with this to help move the ball forward is to think about putting this into the review process and in the hiring process as well as training people right from the get-go. You, as part of the procurement function, you're going to be looking at these things about what you do. We're going to be looking at what you do as a team. And I think that that's 2 ways in which the ball could be moved forward internally.
Okay. Well, that's the internal metrics category. What about the metrics that focus on suppliers and other value chain partners?
So similarly here, now we're looking at things outside of our company. And we're looking at the supply base, right? So we want to look again at the goods and services we're buying. And I said that we want to buy those environmentally friendly if we can. And we're going to look at the second category, which is environmentally responsible suppliers. That's who we want to do business with. So what are some metrics aimed at goods and services? So you might look at the % of your logistics or your transportation that you contract with SmartWay certified logistics providers or carriers. SmartWay is an EPA program that certifies carriers as meeting certain environmentally friendly attributes. You might look at the percent of your procured chemicals that you've biosubstituted out. So what do I mean by that? So there are a lot of chemicals out there that you buy on a day-to-day basis that aren't so environmentally friendly. And there are opportunities in many cases to put a more environmentally friendly chemical or substitute in place. And so what percent of that work have you done? How have you changed your chemicals by? What percent of purchased energy that you buy originates from alternative energy sources? It's a tough one today, but you can move that ball forward. Or what percent of IT hardware that you buy for your company is Energy Star certified or Gold? There are different certifications out there now. So have you moved the ball forward there in goods and services? And then with respect to suppliers' business practices, what can you measure there? What percent of your suppliers have sustainability programs? And you might even drill deeper. What type of suppliers? What type of sustainability programs? What percent or number of your suppliers have greenhouse gas reduction initiatives in place? There will be more and more of those. And what percent of your suppliers' business practices are environmentally friendly because they have e-meetings rather than business travel, which we know is not the greatest for the environment. I think to do this, you may want to think of segmenting the supply base down by geography, because this is happening very differently around the world, and it may be unfair to categorize, to compare activity in the United States on the same plane with that in Asia or in Europe. You might want to segment it by size. Smaller organizations are more challenged here and have done less work. And I'm not suggesting you give them a pass, but I think it's important to recognize they are somehow different than global multinationals who've done a lot of work here. So you might want a different evaluation criteria of your suppliers.